Committee will come to order. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky for 5 minutes.
I yield 30 seconds to the gentlelady from Indiana.
A quick follow-up on CHS-1 from page 243, who, according to your report, created conspiracy allegation in direct conflict with his recording and misstated significant and material fact to the FBI, among other things, and you're unable to establish his intent. Would you be able to provide to the committee a recording of your CHS-1 interview on April 6, 2021, per page 192, or any other interviews in your possession? Yes or no?
Did you refer to page 43? I'm sorry, if I can just find on page 43.
Page 92, would you provide recording to the committee that you list? Yes or no?
The recording with confidential human source 1, I think, is what she's asking about. And she would like that provided. She's asking if that could be provided to the committee, Mr. Durham.
I mean, it's a piece of evidence that belongs to the FBI. I think probably that's better directed to the FBI.
Okay.
Reclaiming my time, Mr. Durham, this seems to all started with one person, but I don't see his name in your report. I see it in Mueller's report 89 times. Who did Mr. Papadopoulos meet with that gave him this supposed Russian information?
When Mr. Papadopoulos was interviewed by the FBI, he had identified Joseph Mifsud as a person who had provided him that information.
Did you interview Joseph Mifsud?
We attempted to interview him. We pursued every lead that we had. We talked to a lawyer that he had in Europe, but we never were able to actually make contact with him so we could interview him.
Do you think he's a Western source? Is he associated with Western intelligence?
It's hard to say who Mr. Mifsud is associated with. He was tied up with Link University, Mr. Scotti, who had involvement in the Italian government, and they were acquainted. It's hard to say who Mifsud.
I'm going to yield the remainder of my time to Mr. Gates.
Hard to say who Mifsud is. He's the guy who started the whole thing. We've known it for years. Go ahead and play the video.
When the special counsel's office interviewed Mifsud, did he lie to you guys too?
Can't get into that.
Did you interview Mifsud?
Can't get into that.
Is Mifsud Western intelligence or Russian intelligence?
Can't get into that.
Well, I'm reading from your report. Mifsud told Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos tells the diplomat tells the FBI opens the investigation July 31st, 2016, and here we are 3 years later, July of 2019, the country's been put through this, and the central figure who launches it all lies to us, and you guys don't hunt him down and interview him again, and you don't charge him with a crime. Maybe a better course of action is to figure out how the false accusation started. Maybe it's to go back and actually figure out why Joseph Mifsud was lying to the FBI. And here's the good news. Here's the good news. That's exactly what Bill Barr is doing. And thank goodness for that. That's exactly what the Attorney General and John Durham are doing.
Well, Mr. Durham, was that what you were doing?
I'm sorry, is that what?
Was finding out who Mifsud was what you were doing?
We pursued that avenue, yes.
Right, but was he... This whole thing was an op, Mr. Durham. This wasn't like a bumbling, fumbling FBI that like couldn't get FISA straight. They ran an op. So who put Mifsud in play? You don't know, do you?
I do not know that. I can't give you the
answer. For years, you had years to find out the answer to what Mr. Jordan said was the seminal question, and you don't have it. And it just begs the question whether or not you were really trying to find that out. Because it's one thing to criticize the FBI for their FISA violations, to write a report. They've been criticized in plenty of reports. Some have referred to your work as just a repackaging and regurgitation of what the Inspector General already told us. So if you weren't going to do what Mr. Jordan said you were going to do in that video and give us the basis for all of it, what's this all been about?
Well, I'm not exactly sure the import of your question. If your question is, did we try to locate and interview Mr. Mifsud, the answer is yes.
Why didn't you subpoena?
We expended...
Wait, why didn't you subpoena him to a grand jury?
I'm sorry, why not?
Why didn't you send him a grand jury subpoena?
Mr. Mifsud? You'd have to find Mr. Mifsud before you could serve a grand jury subpoena on him.
You guys were out in Italy. Was it you and Bill Barr looking for authentic pasta over there, or Mifsud?
No, we not. We were looking for information that might help us locate Mifsud.
But you know who I think could probably locate him? The features of Western intelligence and possibly our own government that put him in play. Like, your report seems to be less an indictment of the FBI and more of an inoculation, lowercase I, of course. And like many inoculations, it may have worse consequences down the road. We'll have some time to discuss this matter further, but it's just hard to like pretend as though this was a sincere effort when you don't get to the fundamental thing that started the whole deal. I yield back.
I was away from my family for 4 years, essentially doing this investigation. Is my view is a sincere effort. The fact that you can't find somebody overseas should not come as a big surprise.
Could you find out?
Reclaiming my time, is he alive or dead?
We don't know.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Durham, isn't it true that Danchenko admitted that information he provided to Christopher Steele in June of 2016 was, quote, rumor and speculation?
Correct.
And Danchenko himself estimated that he was responsible for 80% of the intelligence and 50% of the analysis in the Steele dossier. Is that right?
That's correct.
Do you agree with his assessment or his estimate of his participation in the dossier?
Yeah, we have no reason to doubt that. I mean, Steele identified him as the primary subsource, or the principal source of the information.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Steele used that rumor and speculation to build his dossier, and we've wandered all over this. There's none of those statements were corroborated at all, and yet Danchenko's reputation for veracity was considered bad. He was considered a boastful man who had low credibility, right?
There was information that the Bureau had along those lines, yes, sir.
Yeah. And in fact, when he lost his visa, his work permit, he used a Russian business as a front to basically fraudulently get a visa to work in the United States. Is that right? Page 128 of your report.
Yeah, he went to work for a company in the United States, and Steele was paying him through a cutout through that company in the United States.
Yeah, most of us who look at that area of the law regularly, like I do, would say that's immigration fraud. So, and it's also true, we talked about this, it's true, there was an FBI counter-espionage investigation into Danchenko 2009 to 2011, and that was a result of him approaching a Brookings Institution co-worker trying to essentially solicit espionage on behalf of the Russian government. And then, even though the Washington field office is right there and he lived just a few miles from the Washington field office, the case was closed on Mr. Danchenko, that investigation, right?
The Danchenko investigation is being done by Baltimore, the Baltimore field office, but that's right, he stayed where he
nonetheless, he lived around. I live out there. I know. I live around the corner from there. So let's take a look at. Let's boil this down. After determining that nothing that Danchenko told Steele could be verified, it was all a pack of lies and innuendo and rumor. After further determining that he had attempted to solicit espionage for Russia, and he had himself been subject of an investigation by the Bureau, and after having committed immigration fraud, the FBI hired him on as an informer and paid him $220,000 and proposed an additional $300,000 to be paid to him. Now that's all, that's your testimony, that's in the report, it's all there. And that's even after the Validation Management Unit had determined that Danchenko was a concern and likely had connections to Russian intelligence. That's in your report as well.
Correct.
And very Special Agent Helson knew most of these facts, but continued to endorse Danchenko's recruitment and payment as a confidential human source, right?
That's correct.
So I'm going to give you these things, and I think you understand why so many of us are underwhelmed with some of your recommendations about FBI, but overwhelmed by what's gone on here. The FISA application, we've talked about that, where that came from. We talked about that the FBI has conducted millions of unconstitutional backdoor FISA 702 searches. Disparate treatment of Hillary Rodham Clinton, which you discuss in your report. The sweetheart Hunter Biden plea deal that would send normal Americans to jail for years, he's getting nothing. We have 50 intelligence officers signing onto a letter stating they would rather have a job in the Biden administration than tell the truth to the American people. The Hunter Biden laptop suppression, the DOJ targeting parents at school board meetings, a federal prosecutor setting a quota, essentially, on additional January 6th individuals. He said he's got to get 2,000 more. That's a quota. That's a bounty. DHS targeting Catholics at church. Hoaxes villainizing border agents while the border itself is under attack. That's all from this agencies. And I understand that you're loyal to your institution. I get that. But Ms. Sparks gave an excellent enumeration of all the things that you found in your report. And that's why people like me, and I don't want to speak for anybody else on here, we're baffled, just utterly baffled, that more people have not been held accountable for their crimes. Because these are crimes. What's gone on in this country, the division in this country today, I can trace back to one thing. It isn't Trump going down the escalator. It is this Steele dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton through the cutouts, and that's caused the division in this country today. I yield back.
Witness can respond.
I'm not sure there was a question at the end.
Okay. I know, I'm just giving you
I was
opportunity to
gonna, I
respond.
didn't get there.
Yeah. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Biggs. You've given us testimony today that you're disappointed that the FBI didn't cooperate more, right? That was your testimony.
Said that.
Yeah, so we're disappointed too, but the difference is when regular folks do things that are wrong and unlawful, there's typically greater effort to try to get those people before a grand jury to utilize criminal process where appropriate, not for other purposes. And it's just like, oh, well, Bill Priestep, the guy who might have set this whole op in motion, he just didn't want to talk to you about certain things, and you were real accommodating to that. And then Mifsud, the person who juices Papadopoulos to create this predicate that you find improper. You guys, I mean, did you ever know who his lawyer was, Mifsud's lawyer?
Talked to his lawyer in Europe. I don't know if
So
he
wait, you could
represented
find the guy's
United
lawyer,
States.
but you couldn't find him?
We contacted somebody that we knew had represented him in a part of the effort to try to locate him.
And you got the lawyer. And then now you're sitting here in front of the judiciary saying you could find the guy's lawyer, but you couldn't effectuate the service of a subpoena because you couldn't find him?
Well,
do you know
first
how
of all,
silly that sounds?
as you may or may not know, we wouldn't have the authority to serve a subpoena overseas. The lawyer didn't know where Mifsud was. He was in communication with him, but he claimed not to know where he was. And we were trying to arrange an opportunity to talk to Mifsud.
Did you take possession of 2 BlackBerry phones from Mifsud in any way?
There were phones that were provided to us by
So you could find the
Mifsud's
phones, but
lawyer.
not the guy.
Correct?
Do you see how silly this looks? Like you found the lawyer, you found the phones, but the actual dude who got ordered by Western intelligence to go start this thing you couldn't find? It's kind of laughable. It seems like more than disappointment. It seems like you weren't really trying to expose the true core of the corruption. That you were trying to go at it another way.
Yeah. As we said in the report, and as I said in my opening remarks, we pursued the facts as best we could.
Well, how about
given
this
the tools
fact?
that we have?
Okay, how about this fact, Mr. Durham? The entire Mueller team does a hard reset on their Apple phone in synchronization to wipe away evidence. Did you investigate that?
I've read that.
Well, why did you investigate it? Who gave the order on the Mueller team to wipe the phones?
Yeah, that was not something that we were asked to look at, and we didn't.
No,
look
that's
at that.
not true, Mr. Durham. That is not true because I'm holding the document that authorizes your activity, and it specifically says the investigation of Special Counsel Robert Mueller. It's in Mr. Chairman, I seek unanimous consent to enter into the record the order that says that you're supposed to investigate these things. And so, like, whether it's the Mueller team, Mifsud, how about Azra Turk? Azra Turk, what's Azra Turk's real name? Do you know that?
I'm not going to be disclosing the names of FBI personnel that are otherwise unavailable.
But an FBI, so the FBI sends somebody to go honeypot George Papadopoulos. Who gave the order to do that?
I think that's beyond the scope of what's in the report.
It's literally the scope of what your charging order is. Who put it in motion? We get after it was put in motion, the FBI did a bunch of wrong and corrupt things. Totally understand. We're trying to deal with that. But when you are part of the cover-up, Mr. Durham, then it makes our job harder.
Yeah, well, if that's your thought, I mean, there's no way of dissuading you from that. I can tell you that it's offensive and that the people who worked on this investigation have spent their lives trying to protect the people in this country and pursue within the law
You went
what it is that we
Mr.
are
Durham.
authorized
Wait,
to
hold
do.
on. You tried 2 cases, lost both of them, and then the one guilty plea you got, Kleinsmith is back to practicing law in Washington, D.C. today.
That's beyond my control.
Right, but the fact that you allowed that plea to occur, right, and then the punishment was insufficient. The fact that you didn't charge Andrew McCabe, you didn't convict the lying Democrats or the lying Russians, you didn't investigate Mifsud or the Mueller probe, even though, as we sit here today in black letter, that was your charge. Have you ever heard of the Washington Generals?
The Washington Generals, yes.
Yeah, and they're the team that basically gets paid to show up and lose, right?
Well, I'm sure that the players who exert blood, sweat, and tears don't view it that way, but you might.
I think they do. I think they do, because the job of the Washington Generals is to show up every night and to play the Harlem Globetrotters. And their job is to lose.
I'm sorry, I was thinking of a different thing.
Yeah, so their job is to lose. And I'm kind of wondering, and it just seems so facially obvious that it's not what's in your report that's telling, it's the omission, it's the lack of work you did. And for the people like the chairman who put trust in you, I think you let them down, I think you let the country down, and you are one of the barriers to the true accountability that we need.
Do I get to respond to that or comment on that? Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've ever investigated a crime.
I don't know that you have. You didn't investigate these, Mr. Durham.
Whether or
How about
not,
Andy McCabe? Did you charge him? Did you investigate him?
Gentlemen, time has expired. The witness can respond, and then we'll move on to our last.
I don't know, sir, whether or not you've ever had occasion to try to investigate crimes under the rules and regulations and under the Constitution that we're bound by. We can gather evidence in particularly lawful ways. Can't charge people because we might think
It's not
something.
just that
We
you
can
didn't
charge
charge, you
people.
didn't investigate.
Gentlemen's
You didn't
time.
investigate the Mueller team
Gentlemen's
wiping their
time.
phones, and you
Gentlemen's
won't tell
time.
us who gave the orders because you're protecting those people.
Gentleman's time has expired. The gentlelady from Wyoming is recognized.
Mr. Durham, in reviewing your report, I sincerely wanted to understand the work that you did and decipher the various investigations that we have been discussing. The origins, the history, the backstory, the who's, the why's, the what's, the what ifs, and the how. I desperately wanted to figure out what happened to what was once our flagship law enforcement agencies, the FBI and the DOJ, to determine what went wrong and to evaluate how we can go forward from here. I have listened with great interest, hoping to find some answers to the burning questions of the day. And I have reached a few conclusions that I do not believe are subject to dispute or debate. Now, I truly appreciate your regard for the agency you have dedicated your career to. I am sure that as your investigation progressed, you must have been truly saddened by what you found. What you have exposed, however, is that we are dealing with something so corrupt and so rotten that no amount of face paint, deflection, or whitewashing can fix this. You have been asked lots of questions about predicates, protocols, the Steele dossier, the Australian connection, Mr. Papadopoulos, Mr. Carter, the FISA court, and Crossfire Hurricane, among others. Your responses have been enlightening, but let's get to the brass tacks. None of those people or documents or reports were relevant to the FBI when it identified Donald Trump as public enemy number one. What do I mean? The accuracy and veracity of the Steele dossier was irrelevant to the FBI. The accuracy and veracity of the reports coming from the Australian embassy were irrelevant to the FBI. The fact that the Russian experts in the CIA, FBI, NSA, and other agencies had no evidence of any kind of relationship between Mr. Trump and Putin or Russia was irrelevant to the FBI. And the fact that there was no verifiable evidence, such as testimony, documents, videos, or recordings of Russian collusion, was irrelevant to the FBI. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing that the FBI did was designed to show that Donald J. Trump was a Russian asset. That wasn't the purpose of the entire charade. How do I know this is true? Because they told us so. The very people who cooked this up and the ones who ran this entire operation. Strzok, Lisa Page, Andrew McCabe, Kleinsmith, Steele, the DNC, Perkins Coie. It was never their purpose to prove Russian collusion, and in fact, from the very beginning, they knew that no such thing actually existed. They knew that the entire Russian collusion narrative was fabricated by the Clinton campaign to deflect attention from her mishandling of classified materials and destruction of official emails. But they didn't need to prove Russian collusion. They just had to keep the investigation alive. And so long as they had a complicit press, and so long as they had people in this very body who has been here, one of the gentlemen who has been here much of the day, who would go on TV every night and lie about the smoking gun, they could further their personal and political agendas. Oh no, the purpose of Crossfire Hurricane wasn't to prove Russian inclusion, it was to destroy Donald J. Trump. And they told us that with the text messages that are set forth on page 49 and 51 of your report, 49 and 50 of your report. And then, if they failed at blocking Mr. Trump from being elected as president, well, they had a backup plan. They had their insurance policy, to use Strzok's terminology, which was to make it impossible for him to govern, to use whatever tools were available to taint his presidency, the legitimacy of his election, his ability to work with foreign leaders, and to make everything about Russia, Russia, Russia. And how has this corruption and rot manifested itself in our everyday lives, in our national culture, in our ability to solve the problems we are facing? It has destroyed some of the key foundations of this country. A foundation built on equal protection, on the belief that justice is blind, on the belief that you will be held accountable if you commit a fraud of the magnitude of what we have been discussing here today, on the belief that due process, justice, and constitutional rights are more than mere words. It has left a smoldering, hot, volcanic mess where the soul of this country used to be. All because a few people in the FBI decided they wanted to destroy a political candidate and ultimately a president and anyone associated with him. While these folks set out to destroy a presidential candidate and later a presidency, the fact is that they destroyed so much more, and that will be their ultimate legacy. One casualty is America's faith in our institution, and another casualty is the erosion of a justice system that is supposed to apply equally to all Americans, but that has been weaponized to protect the favored few elites, the Clintons, the Bidens, while targeting political enemies. That is the current legacy of the FBI and DOJ. Mr. Durham, here's my question. How long do you think that this country will survive?
Mr. Chairman, the time has expired. You can't ask a question.
A two-tier justice system that seeks to persecute people based on their political beliefs?
Witness may respond. Gentlelady's time has expired.
I don't, do I respond?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't think that things can go too much further with the view that law enforcement, particularly the FBI, the Department of Justice, runs a two-tiered system of justice. The nation can't stand under those circumstances.
Well said. Gentlelady yields back. This concludes today's